we're going to dive into one of the most raw and honestly intense conversations ever put to paper, Job's plea before God. It's this incredible story about deep suffering, the sting of being misunderstood, and, well, having the guts to take your case directly to the highest authority in the universe.
We're starting right here because this feeling, it's universal, isn't it? We've all been there. We've all felt unfairly judged, had someone twist our words, or just totally dismiss our pain. The story of Job just taps right into that raw human nerve of being kicked when you're already down.
So who's doing the kicking? Well, let's meet one of Job's friends, a guy named Zophar. He shows up and you'd think he's there to offer some comfort, but yeah, the words that come out of his mouth land like a ton of bricks. And this right here, this just nails the core problem. Job's friends had one job, to be comforters. That's it. But instead, they totally flipped the script and became his accusers. There's this massive gap between what Job desperately needs and what he's getting. And that's where all the sparks start to fly.
Just look at how Zophar builds his argument. It's not just a friendly disagreement. First, he calls Job a foolish babbler, basically saying, you talk so much, you must be hiding some kind of sin. Then he drops this absolutely brutal line. He tells Job that God has actually gone easy on him, that his punishment could be way worse. And finally, he offers this ridiculously simple, almost insulting solution. Hey, just say you're sorry, and poof, it'll all go away. It's a complete shutdown of what Job is actually going through.
But here's the thing. Job does not just sit there and take it. He is absolutely devastated, for sure, but his mind is still razor sharp. He pushes back, and he pushes back hard. His reply is frankly a work of sarcastic genius. Oof, you can just feel the sting in those words, can't you? Oh, right, only you guys are righteous. Without you, I guess wisdom would just die out. See, this isn't just the rambling of a broken man. This is precise. It's cutting. It's the sound of someone who refuses to let his integrity get torn apart by cheap arguments. He's just taking their own arrogance and throwing it right back in their faces. So who are we supposed to believe here? Zophar, the accuser, or Job, the one who's suffering? Well, here's the kicker. The story gives us this incredible piece of inside information right from the very beginning. God himself has already given his verdict on Job's character. He calls him a blameless and upright man. That changes everything, right? As the audience, we know Job is telling the truth. And Job has his own theory about what's going on. He figures his friends just can't get it. They can't understand his position because they're speaking from a place of comfort, of safety. From his point of view, they're mocking him simply because they've never had to walk through this kind of fire themselves. It's that classic conflict, the person who's living the tragedy versus the person who's just talking about it from a safe distance. And this is where the whole story just takes a massive turn. Job seems to realize that arguing with his friends is a total dead end. They're never going to get it. So he turns his attention away from them and toward the only one who can actually judge his case. He basically says, all right, I'm done with you guys. I'm taking this to the Supreme Court. He stops debating these friends-turned-accusers and decides he's going to stand before God himself, not just as a man in pain, but as a defendant, ready to plead his case. And like any defendant, he's got a couple of pretrial requests for the judge. He lays out two conditions to make it a fair fight. First, withdraw your hand of punishment from me. I mean, he can't exactly make his case while he's actively being crushed, right? And second, do not terrify me with your majesty. He's asking for a fair hearing, one where he isn't so completely overwhelmed by God's power that he can't even get a word out. So with the court basically in session, Job gets right to the heart of it. He asks the question that has echoed down through all of human history whenever disaster strikes. Why? Why is this happening to me? And it's not some arrogant demand. It's that natural, gut-wrenching human cry for understanding when you're facing overwhelming pain. Now, Job's prayer isn't neat and tidy. It's not some polite request. It is a raw, unfiltered outpouring from a place of just absolute devastation. He holds nothing back. And he paints this bleak but incredibly honest picture of how fragile it is to be human. This comparison he makes just captures his perspective perfectly. He looks at nature, at a tree, and he sees resilience. You can cut a tree down and it still has the potential to sprout again. But then he looks at his own life, at our lives, and he sees something way more fragile, something that blooms for a moment and then it's gone, just like a fleeting shadow. There's no do-over. So from that point of view, Job feels completely insignificant. He says he's like withered leaves or dry stubble just being blown around by the wind.
And this leads to his big, confusing question. If I'm so small and frail, why would an all-powerful God be focusing so much intense, crushing attention on me?
His desire for the pain to just end is all-consuming. The text uses these powerful images to get it across. It's like a soldier on a battlefield, just desperate for the war to be over, or an enslaved person counting the minutes until they're free. It's not just wanting things to get better. It's this deep, desperate longing for the suffering to just stop.
And then, right in the middle of all this pain, all this despair, all this raw questioning, Job says something that seems to fly in the face of everything he's just said. It might be one of the most powerful statements of faith you'll ever hear. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Just let that sink in for a second. Even if the judge's verdict is death, even if his suffering ends because God himself ends it, his underlying trust is still there. And this is the incredible paradox of Job's faith. It's mind-blowing. He is 100% prepared to stand before God and argue his innocence, to question, to cry out, to demand answers. But at the very same time, he can declare his total trust in God's character. What he proves is that real faith isn't the absence of questions, it's having trust right in the middle of them.
And that really leaves us with this central question of the whole story. Job is basically yelling into what feels like a divine silence. He's making his case, but he's not getting an answer right away. So the question for him, and really for us, is this. When all the easy answers fail, and the heavens just seem quiet, where do you actually find faith?